We sat down with J.R. Land, Director of IT at Snap, as in Snapchat, to talk about something that every IT professional faces at some point or another: how to get your team from reactive firefighting to proactive strategy. JR has scaled IT through fast-paced growth at Snap, Twitter, and Salesforce, through seismic shifts like IPOs, the shift to remote work, and now, of course, the broad-scale adoption of AI. Today, he says his biggest insight is this: the decisions you make when you're still running on duct tape and cold brew have an outsized impact in determining whether you become that strategic partner or stay stuck fighting fires forever. This is The It Factor, presented by Rippling IT, where we bring you conversations with the most forward-thinking minds in tech. Let's get started. JR credits an old manager of his at Twitter with teaching him a lesson, and he's carried with him ever since. Onboarding matters a lot. It's not just about getting people logged in, although that does help. It's about setting the tone for how your entire organization comes to view IT in their time with the company.
One of the things that he really kind of instilled while I was at Twitter was, especially when it came to new hire onboarding, like we have an opportunity to make a first impression on somebody that's excited about joining the company. And he really zeroed in on, hey, we have to get this right. That's one of the biggest takeaways I took from Stillings when I was working at Twitter. And as I transitioned to Snap, that was kind of the first thing that I locked into. You know, the stage that we were at, we were pre-IPO, we were hiring a ton. We were based out of Venice Beach in LA. And so we were doing new hire onboarding in this random condo on Venice Beach. And it felt like a lot of things were out of our control. Yeah. And it was kind of like, here's kind of the one opportunity I have that has impact immediately.
When everything feels chaotic, onboarding becomes this kind of repeatable superpower. JR realized that those first impressions with new hires counted for a lot in terms of how those employees would come to interact with his team down the line.
That first impression there is like whether or not somebody is going to want to engage with you in the future. Because a lot of times people, especially at a place like at Snap or anywhere else, like they don't want to look dumb. They're like, hey, I should be able to figure this out. But if they know that there's a friendly face attached to IT, like they feel comfortable showing up.
He was setting a foundation. When someone knows there's a friendly face between this otherwise nameless process and or system, then IT stops being this black box and starts being partners. And that shift can change everything about the way your organization works. But let's back up for a sec and talk about a mistake that JR says haunts every scaling IT team, his very much included.
So I will say this was a mistake that I personally had made, especially if you're scaling really, really quickly. Right? Like the focus tends to be onboarding new tools, hiring as fast as possible. And one of the things that I had personally made the mistake of was not necessarily paying attention to asset management, right? And so like when you think about an IT team, everybody knows digital, right? But like, oh yeah, we're responsible for the computers, but they're thinking about the functionality of the computers. They're not thinking necessarily of like the full life cycle of it. But one of the things that we ran into, or that I personally ran into, was just this idea that like we were purchasing computers, tagging computers, doing kind of the basics, but we weren't getting to a place where I didn't pay enough attention to it because it was just scale, 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 but nobody was going back and looking at the details of, hey, did these get logged in correctly? Are these the things that, like, what can we do with this actual data? I think it's one of those things that you just don't pay attention to because you're paying attention to everything else, and it all of a sudden it becomes tech debt.
That can be tech debt with real consequences, because asset management is about a lot more than just knowing where your laptops are.
Yeah, there's a cost component. There's definitely controls that you have to worry about. There's definitely like security aspect that you have to worry about. And then, like things like legal hold. If somebody's on a legal hold or litigation hold, like, well, those assets have to be retained sometimes indefinitely. Early stage, I think like it's very easy to get caught up in, hey, our purpose is to keep things running. Who cares about keeping the receipts on everything? That part, right? If you're trying to go back in time 2 or 3 years and go and say, hey, what were these purchase orders about? Like that can get really, really messy.
All of a sudden, you're trying to reconstruct 2 years of purchases based on scattered receipts and vague memories. So if JR could do it all again, he'd start thinking harder about how to organize assets a lot sooner. Looking forward, the big bad that has IT teams scrambling to react is not that hard to guess. Here we find ourselves in the age of shadow AI.
Instead of shadow IT, it's shadow AI nowadays, right?
Yeah.
The tools are so easy to use and get access to that and also provide instant value, right? For people just going in and doing simple prompts, that it's actually hard to control the sprawl. And so I think it's showing up whether you like it or not, right? Because people are downloading ChatGPT or whatever their favorite tool is, and very likely that they're using it to help write some docs. Sometimes they're using it to write some code. And I think that the IT departments that are realizing that they need to give people a place to land and get them an official tool sooner than later are the ones that are starting to get ahead of it.
Most of the time, one would hope, your employees aren't going out of their way to shadow it up just for rebellion's sake. They're trying to be productive and embrace new technology. So JR says that what he's found is it's a lot easier to try and partner with people as they do that, rather than cracking down on every case. And JR's wording there is really key. It's about partnership, not asking people to submit a ticket and await judgment. Because the reason Shadow AI exists is really the reason that Shadow IT has always existed. Your approval process is onerous, and it makes it slower and more painful than just buying something and dealing with the consequences later. Fix that, and you might start to get a much clearer idea of what your employees are actually using. Managing your own systems are one thing, but what about when you inherit someone else's? What happens when you walk into an IT environment that's... I'll let JR describe it.
Let's call it a messy situation, right? If I walk into a messy situation, the first thing I want to do is actually combat any natural urges I have to go and immediately fix it. I might look at something and go, hey, this isn't exactly the way that I would do it, but I actually need to stop for a second and try to understand how we got there in the first place. A couple of things, right? I think the mess that you're looking at could actually be messier than what you realize, or actually cleaner than what you realize, right? I just have one POV. And especially if it's like a brand new team, a brand new technology, something that I'm new to, there's going to be people that have the receipts. There's going to be people that have the context. There's going to be people that have a little bit more understanding of why we ended up in the position that we're in, or why it maybe even appears messy from an outsider.
They all do, of course, but this one especially is a lesson that you can tell came from experience. Every system has a story. Every process was built to solve a specific problem at a specific time. Understanding that context instead of just blowing by it is the difference between making things better and only making things different.
So what I would say is like, what was the purpose of this thing? Whether it's a technology, a process, like org design, whatever the thing is that feels messy, it's like, what was the purpose? And what was the purpose? What's the function? What were we trying to solve at the time? And then can you connect the dots from that to what is it actually doing today? Because it might look messy, but if it's actually accomplishing what we expected to accomplish, maybe it's not actually a problem to solve. But now I understand it. Now I have the context behind it.
That's how you move from someone who changes things just for the sake of changing them to someone who improves them. You want to be the latter. As far as career advice goes, JR had some really keen insight into what constitutes leadership. When someone comes to him and says that they'd like to advance their career or move up the ladder, as it were, he starts by asking them a series of questions, tries to understand what it is they actually want.
I'd be curious about what their definition of strategic leadership role is, right? Because I think like too often I kind of get this, like I have this conversation where it's, hey, how do I get into IT management? And I go, okay, well, why? Do you want to be more influential? Do you actually want to get into management? Because that's a whole different job profile, right? It's good that you have the technical depth, but this is about people and organizations. And there's a lot of like administrative work that you want to get into, that you'll need to get into as a manager. Or do you want to be more of a technical leader that is more of an architect and designing things? I think it's really important if somebody is interested in being more of a strategic leader, one, I need to understand what is that to them? Like, how do they define that? I actually think that every single day, somebody has an opportunity to be a leader. I think that like leadership is, in my mind, totally decoupled from the idea of being a manager.
And that's the core insight, that leadership is not about your title. It's about how you show up every day.
It really just depends on the context that you're in and how you show up. And so really kind of understanding, okay, well, first, what's the definition of strategic leadership for you? And then almost kind of auditing their workday or their current role or their current environment and saying, hey, what parts of what you do today could you have more influence on? Or what are parts that you want to improve? What are parts that you could step in and play more of a leadership role? And let's figure out how we can do that in the context of how you show up now. And it might be as simple as, hey, the next time you're in the team meeting, right, you have a different way that you want to approach things, just raise your hand and say, hey, I'm thinking about this slightly differently.
Strategic leadership, then, according to JR, isn't about waiting for someone to give you permission to lead. It's about building that muscle every day until leading becomes second nature. So, what can you do this week? Here's your 3-step action plan. Number 1, audit your onboarding experience. Walk through it as if you're a new hire yourself. Where do people get stuck? Where do they feel lost? Pick one friction point and make it 10% better this week. Number 2, document your assets. Yes, it's boring. You got to do it anyway. Spend 2 hours documenting what you have, where it is, and who has it. Future you will thank present you when audit season arrives. Number 3, become the AI bridge. Instead of saying no to AI tools, say, let's figure this out together. Create a simple intake process. What problem are you solving? What have you tried? And explore those options together. Because whether you're managing onboarding from a Venice Beach condo or you're wrangling shadow AI at a Fortune 500, the principle remains entirely the same. It's about building systems that help people succeed rather than those that get in their way.
Really, when it comes down to it, right, like it's both the technical systems and the people systems that really are important. When I say people systems, it's all about the culture and the trust and all the things in between that make that organization tick.
Want more stories like this? Join the 10,000 plus IT pros who subscribe to the It Factor, a weekly newsletter that brings you expert insights from the leaders who are redefining what IT means in the modern workplace. See you there.